Okay, so here's Serum 2. I'm just going to go through what's new, just by glancing at some of the new features, then we can start diving deep into how they work and what they sound like. So the first thing you're going to notice is we've got 3 oscillators now instead of 2, we've got a C oscillator now, which is great. Got more control, you can layer more things up now and get more creative, which is awesome. We've got 2 filters now instead of 1, which is great. You can create more interesting filter characteristics on your patches. You can even map both of them to a macro. Really cool. We've also got a few new filters as well, actually. In the S2 section, we've got the DJ mixer, which is kind of like the Pioneer DJM color filter, diffuser, Moog ladder, acid ladder, EMS ladder. We'll go through these as well, and I'll show you some patches that use them that I've built so you can hear how they sound. Okay, regarding the oscillators, they've been upgraded as well. There's some really cool stuff going on with these now. So not only can they load wavetables, Serum is a wavetable synthesizer at heart, but it can do a lot more now. We can load multi-samples, samples, granular, and spectral. So we can actually load SFZ files into it now, which can give us multi-samples. So let's say you've got a piano, you can export each key into its own sample to really sort of recreate it accurately when you load it into here. It sounds really good. You've got a full-blown sampler now. I know in Serum 1, people used to kind of get around this because the actual noise oscillator is in fact a sampler. So people used to load samples into that to make their patches and add sort of sample layers to it. Whereas now you don't even need to do that. You can just load a sample straight into these now and get all the same control over those samples as you would a typical wavetable. So no more hackiness having to put things as wavetables anymore. You can just load samples straight into it now. And it works great. You can set loop points. You can make them one-shots. It's a pretty powerful sampler. So if you want to add a bit of sustain to your sample, you can set the loop point like you would on a typical sampler in like your DAW, like Ableton, for example. Really cool. And I'll show you some examples of that, how that works. We'll go into the mix tab now. We've got a full-blown mixer now, which is really cool. So you can route your oscillators and you can get them to bypass filters. You can send them to buses now. So you can add effects change to buses. So it kind of behaves like its own mini sequencer now. It's really powerful in terms of what you can do with your patches. The effects section's got a bit of an upgrade as well. You can now load unlimited instances of effects, unlike Serum 1, where you could just have one of each. Whereas now you can just, if you want to be crazy and be an absolute madman, you can load as many compressors as you want. I would never do this, but you can if you want to. And the same goes for any other effects. If you want to have like 10 EQs, you can do. We've got a few new additional effects added as well now. We've got a new one called Bode, which is a frequency modulator, which we'll explore as well throughout the different patches. It sounds really cool. Get some really interesting results with that. We've also got Convolve, which is probably my favorite new effect. So now we can load impulse responses into Serum and embed them into the patches. The most common use of an impulse response is reverbs. So you can essentially sample a reverb and embed it into the patch. So if you're not happy with the built-in reverb, so Ableton has a tool where you can actually create impulse responses from plugins. So if you've got a really nice reverb you like the Valhalla stuff, something like Black Hole or whatever, you could load that into an impulse response and then load it into the patch. You can also do things with like tape saturators as well. So if you've got like tape machine recordings, you can get those as impulse responses. So if you want to add additional characteristics to your patches that maybe the built-in effects modules don't offer, you can do this with Convolve. So you've got a whole new level of creativity in terms of your sound design with this, and I'll show you a few patches which use this. Is great. So yeah, if you go into the factory, there's loads of additional impulse responses you can apply to your patches. You could even get some classic lexicon reverbs in there if you want to really create authentic sounding patches from like the 90s and early 2000s, which is really cool. So I've got a utility now, which is great. I kind of look like it's based on the Ableton utility. You've got a high pass filter, low pass filter. You can mono the bass, a bit like how the Ableton utility works. Set the frequency threshold. By default, it's 90 hertz. You can increase the width. You can do panning. Just adds another layer of control over your patches. And you can obviously modulate all these like you would before. And you can assign macros to them as well. So you just got lots more control here, which is great. Another level of control you can add to your patches. Splitter. This is really cool. You can split your effects chains now by the frequency ranges, or if you want to control the mid and side. So, or let's say you only want to apply distortion to a lower part of the frequency range, you can just add the distortion to the lows only. And then you can set the crossover frequency control here, which is really cool. A lot more flexibility now. Same with highs. You can add something that will just control the highs. When I add a delay, I'll just do the highs. I mean, you can just do that here as well. But if you want to set sort of complex chains that only sort of target certain frequency ranges, this is really good for it. And the great thing about these sort of chains now, you can save these. So if you have a chain that you really like and you've been using it on a lot of your sounds, you can just save it here and then it'll appear in the drop down box and then you can just bring it up. And there's some great ones that are built in as well. So you can just experiment with these and see how they sound on your patches. We can also bus now, so if you don't want to have your effect chains inserted onto the patch, you can run them in parallel on a bus. It gives you even more control. Honestly, a lot of these routing features are sort of like basic DAW features, which is pretty crazy to have inside a synthesizer, inside a plugin, which is awesome. So if you want to bus your patches out and add a separate effects chain through the bus without it taking over the main chain, you can do that as well. You can do up to 2 buses, and they also support the same preset system for stacking your effects chains as well. So you could make a chain in here and go, actually, I want to put it on a bus, save it, and then load it onto the bus. Done. Super cool. Another new feature as well, which I really like, is the clip functionality. So now you can do full-blown MIDI sequences inside Serum. Great for making patches like arpeggios, complex bass arrangements. You can even do a full-blown melody in here, and I've actually made a few of these in my bank, which I'll show you. The great thing about this as well is you can load MIDI files into this. So you could just click load clip, select a MIDI file, and it will load it in immediately. So, and now you can load full-blown arrangements in here, which is super cool. And then you can set the range of when it starts and finishes. You can set whether it's mono, poly. You can set the re-trigger, so every time you press the key, it starts from the beginning again. Really, really cool. And the cool thing about this as well is you can actually do automation to your clips. So let's say you have a very specific way you want your clip to play. You can actually assign CC modulation to it. So you can do pitch bends like you would on a regular piano roll in a DAW. You can also assign automations to your macros. So if you've got a macro 1, let's say you assign that to the filter cutoff and you want the filter cutoff to go up over the period of the patch, you can just do it like that, and it works really, really well. It's super cool. So you can make very, very detailed sequences inside Serum for just demonstrating patches, or if you want to provide a patch that has very detailed sequence, you can do this now, which is great. All right, let's dive into the multi-sample usage of this, which is really cool. So let's go to Wavetable, switch it to multi-sample, and we go to Factory, we'll load keys. Let's get a baby grand piano 2, nice piano sound. Okay, so let's play that. Width by using it up a little bit. Got a little bit of reverb as well. Use a new vintage algorithm. Yeah. So what we can do is we can apply a filter, and we can assign an envelope to it like you would with the typical wavetable. So you've got all the same control over this as you would with a typical, wavetable sound. So you can get really creative with this with just samples really fast. Because now you've basically got a multi-layered sampler now, which is awesome. All right, next I want to show you how cool the clip is. So I've got a full sort of sequence in here, like a melody, like a trance style melody that I put in, and just by pressing one key on the keyboard, you can see how it works. It's awesome. All right, now I'm going to show you how you can do really cool things with the clip arrangement in terms of automation. So what I've done is I've got this cool patch that I've made from a track I've made before that has a delay on the end of the sequence of each melody note. So I only want the delay to happen, though, in between the gaps. I've essentially assigned the delay to a macro in here and set the mix control. And in the clip arrangement, it only comes up after the melody. So I'll demonstrate so you can see how it works. So you can apply automations to your patch sequences now as well, so you can really dial in on how you want to present your patches and really get creative when it comes to sound design now, because you essentially got a built-in sequencer, which is really, really cool. Okay, so I'm going to show you some of the factory patches now, because these patches really do highlight what's new with Serum and what you couldn't do before. There's some really nice sounds, really complex as well. I love them. So let's have a look. Let's try this patch here. Crushed chord. Tons of elevators going on here. Here's a really cool strum patch that's like really built up of loads of clips using all 3 multi-samples, which is really cool. You can get some really nice sounding Roland JP80 Super Saw pads with this as well, which I've been experimenting with quite a lot. It's really nice, particularly having the unison control on a per oscillator basis. It just gives you that extra control to really get that kind of authentic old school trance sounding stuff. I love it. Sounds great. All right, I think it's time to dive into the sampler. So I'm going to show you this. So let's load a sample in. Load a sample. I've got a sound here, which is just a sound in C6. So we can bring it down a few octaves. And what we can do as well is we can set a range on that. So we can set the start point, the end point, and then the loop point as well, like you would see with typically most samplers. So we could even drag a point there. So that's the beginning, and then we can set the loop range here, just like you would. You gotta try and find that point in the waveform where the click stops. Usually it's in the troughs. There we go. Can unison it up. Alright, now it's loaded in, we can start running some sounds for it and get it sounding good just from one sample. Let's get some EQ. Okay, Alright, now we've got a sample on here. Let's give it a play. Get it sounding a little bit better than that. Let's go to mix, FX, main. Let's add like an EQ on there. Let's get a bit of a high end on there. Even add a little bit of delay to that as well. You can even put filter envelopes on this. Could even layer an oscillator with it. So you can see pretty quickly from a sample, it can be anything. You can literally sample anything and throw that in. You can start getting stuff really fast in this, and you've got all the same flexibilities you would as a regular synth, which is really cool. And I think it's going to open a lot of really interesting sounds coming out of this. over the next decade, like we did with the previous Serum. So yeah, sounds awesome.